Less than a kilometer away from where I'm speaking right now, there's a green fence topped with barbed wire separating us from a totally different reality. Dramatically shifting from concrete to grass, it's almost a caricature of our current state as a society. In second grade, I remember playing soccer, and I wasn't necessarily very good at soccer, so as my foot slammed into the ground instead of the ball, I remember that green fence and that concrete and the houses behind that concrete being there. And in sixth grade, after having a bad science test and going home in the bus with my head aching, that green fence and that concrete in those houses remained. And now I'm a year and a bit from graduation, and still there's a certain staticity in that green fence, in that concrete, and those houses. It's very unique, this division between Nido and the outside world, to put it that way. We go to the most exclusive school in Chile, and we're constantly reminded of what we have and others don't. But over the years, this sort of became white noise, instead drowned out by tests, essays, and MUN conferences. That was until I really got into social media. As I was writing this TED Talk, of course, I got distracted and opened my phone up to Instagram, where I was greeted with a plethora of infinity pools, Lamborghinis, and plastic surgery. I got out of there quick and went to YouTube, where instead I watched a video about the most expensive Super Bowl ticket and Snoop Dogg's mansion. And yes, Snoop Dogg's mansion has everything you think Snoop Dogg's mansion has in it. Finally, I just went into Spotify, just to listen to some music. But instead, I ended up listening to rappers brag about diamond chains and flying in first class. Isn't it all kind of ridiculous? Now, this new wave of consciousness about how the rich live, how the top 1% lives, is something new with the rise of social media. Sure, it appeared in newspapers, but now it's become an integral part of our lives. And I'm Chilean and American, and ever since Jake Paul went on the scene, I've seen our societies start to divide more and more, polarize, and disconnections start to form. And I'm not saying that Jake Paul and daily vloggers are going to be the downfall of Western civilization, but I'm also not saying that. On a more serious note, Chile's political debate over the last few years has been all over the place. We're talking about copper nationalization, land reform, indigenous rights, and if I kept going, the speech would be longer than The Godfather, and I know all of you are very tired, so I won't. You get the point. At the core of all of these issues, however, is the idea of inequality. And I'm not going to be talking about whether inequality is good or bad for the economy or if it's morally justified. The most renowned economists and philosophers of my time and times before me have not been able to fully answer that question, and I don't think as a junior in high school I will be the first. What I think I can make a point of, however, is the effects inequality has on our lives, and how we can maybe counteract some of those effects. Psychologists and economists categorize a reaction to inequality in two main categories: a rational one, quote unquote, and a quote unquote emotional one. Now, for the rational one, if an individual sees that another individual that they deem as equal, so that means they have the same skill and put in the same effort as them in their eyes, is doing better than them, they will see it as inspiration to put in even more effort and use their skills to a better capacity in order to achieve that goal. So to use a classroom analogy, if I deemed that one of my classmates was getting better grades than me, but I thought, hey, I can do that, I put in that same effort and have those same skills, so let me put in some more. The other reaction, though, seems to appear more in societies with high levels of inequality, and that's an emotional reaction. So in this case, instead of seeing another individual that puts in the same effort and skill as them, this person will view the system as unfair or corrupt or failed. And regardless of whether this is legitimate, whether this is true or not, this reaction can actually have very damaging effects on society. After all, comparing yourself to others, whether it's upwards or downwards, will never really create true happiness or true fulfillment, as it is inherently unachievable. UC Berkeley actually did a study on this, and I don't mean to bore you guys with research, but I promise this is absolutely necessary. For this, they asked a bunch of people to volunteer, and they asked each of these people to place themselves on a 10-rung social ladder and then interact with other people from different social classes. What they found after analyzing, the ways their face twitches, I don't really understand psychology, but I assume that's what they did, and other things, they realized that interactions between people that identified themselves with different rungs of the social ladder were far more difficult. What they also found, however, is that when the issue of socioeconomic class was placed on a lower pedestal or not mentioned at all, these interactions happened pretty much effortlessly, just as the ones between similar social classes happened. So what does this mean? It means that when in a society like ours, the issue of socioeconomic status is placed on such a high pedestal, relationships are very, very hard to form between people. But once it is placed on a lower pedestal, and it doesn't need to be ignored, but once it is placed on a lower pedestal and other things like shared values or maybe love for a shared soccer team are highlighted, relationships can still form. So think about your own life. Odds are most of the people you interact with or have close relationships with, or even day-to-day relationships, come from a similar educational background, are from your family, or share socioeconomic status with you. But this doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And this is the case for me too. I'm going to be honest, that green fence that I mentioned earlier seemed insurmountable, and getting out of those habits is hard, and I still haven't fully done it. But let's go back to that classroom analogy one more time. In a classroom, what matters is, do you like that music? Oh, you're a fan of this soccer team? Me too. Let's go do something later. Let's go hang out. There's no real boundary to that level of achievement. But we insist on putting it in our socioeconomic system. It's also important to acknowledge, however, that life will never be a complete meritocracy. Even though the main driving factor in our success or failure may be our skill and our effort, it also isn't the only one. What this means, what this realization entails, is that we should go into every interaction unassuming of a person's ability, unassuming of a person's effort or a person's life story based on the job they work, the grades they get, the money they make, or the way they present themselves. Again, this is almost impossible to do. I definitely haven't mastered that, but we can work towards it if we really want to build a better future. For me, this has come to life in an initiative I call BOND, which stands for Bridges Over Nido's Diversity. And it's an initiative to help the workers at Nido. Basically, what it aims to do is create real interaction, create real relationships between students and workers, and change the culture at Nido, and eventually, I hope, around Chile and around the world, for more inclusion, more understanding, and more connections. For me, interaction was the long-term solution, not charity. The saying is, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, and teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. It's the same thing with societies. If you give societies temporary fixes, it'll be solved for some given amount of time, but if you change the way societies think, change the way we interact on an individual basis, we can truly change the world. And as I grow into my college applications process and try to develop this club and try to develop so many other aspects of my life as well, I hope I can continue to expand on these initiatives, and I think we all can. My background as a privileged person doesn't have to be an obstacle to this objective unless I make it one. See, mutual respect and understanding, I think, can be the key to unlocking incredible dialogue about the world's issues. Empathy, but also interaction, and also real, unfiltered, person-to-person conversation can bring about a new world which is more inclusive, more open, less tense, less polarized, and all of this drama that we see on social media all the time may begin to die down. Closing thought, we can only really begin to solve our greatest issues when we put our greatest differences aside. Thank you.